Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to our recovery and growth webinars. It seems so long ago. We were in warm weather the last time we held this. Now I'm wearing my pullover because we're feeling fall in the air. So we thought it would be a good time to just reconnect and recap after 2 weeks off for the holiday and for our great HR leadership program. So today we are going to cover kind of summarize, kind of get us back on track around COVID-19, back to school issue, PPP loans, and diversity and inclusion updates. So glad you could join us today, and we will, as always, this event is open for both members and non-members because our kind of role within the community is help everybody deal with the new normal and what we're all facing on a daily basis. So thank you for joining us today. Next slide. We are back and busy as ever, so I just want to give everybody a little bit of an update on what's to come. So we are going to continue the weekly webinars. September 22nd, we were going to deal with privacy and security in the age of COVID, especially from the standpoint of HR, because a lot of the concerns we have are what our employees are doing. September 29th, Mike Trackman will be back with speaking on buying and selling a business in a COVID world. So again, it's a very active market out there from both a buyer and seller standpoint and what to be thinking about. So be sure to join us for that event on September 29th. We're also excited about some special events that are coming up. So beginning on September 29th, we are having a new 90 for 90 workshops. So these are helping managers deal with some of the issues going on, like managing virtually and dealing with stress. And it's, as the title says, 90-minute workshops virtually for $90. So please be sure to check out the link when we send out after the event today and pass it on to any managers, supervisors, or team leads that you think might benefit from that. We're also very excited to announce our sponsorship of a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Leadership Conference on October 7th. In a minute, I'll tell you a little bit more about that. And on October 30th, we're going to have our Total Reward Summit, which again is focused on 2021, but from the standpoint of the new normal. So we'll be looking at compensation trends, culture, especially in light of the kind of changing workforce, as well as the changing way we're working, benefits, what to expect, what companies are doing around family benefits, because it's very different with some of the changes going on. So hope you can join us for the Total Rewards Summit. And then December 10th, we've moved up our business trends event. So right now we're gathering surveys from businesses throughout the region, actually nationally. And we hold this event with noted economist Joel Naroff. We're moving that up to December because, again, with everything going on, I think people are very keen to hear about that. But he's also going to be joined by Mike Trackman, who's going to be talking about HR things to be thinking about post-election, because as we all know, that's a very significant event that's arising along with COVID. So that's it will be an entertaining and informative event. And right now, we're planning on that being completely virtual. But if things would change, we would let everybody know, because that's an event. There's a lot of networking going on with leaders and owners and so on. So look for more information on that. So again, we're very excited to bring all these to our audience, and hope you can join us for some of these. Okay, next slide. I mentioned Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Conference. This is one of the most critical areas right now. We're very engaged with a lot of our members in companies trying to make change, and it's not easy, but we're very enthusiastic about our role working with members. This is a great conference that I encourage everybody to attend. We've made it a very affordable conference. You can see it's on October 7th from 11 to 3:15. It's less of a conference and more of a symposium to really hear kind of some things to be considering. So you can see our speakers here, the topics are going to speak about. So again, post event, we will send out a link for registration. Hope you can join us for this event, and again, share it with others in your organization, because I think this is going to be, DE&I is going to be a bottom-up and top-down effort over the next several years. So again, we're pleased to bring this to our members and really to the businesses at large in the region. Okay, so let's get on with the show for today. We're going to start off with Mike Trackman will give us an update on PPP, especially on the forgiveness process, loan application process, which most people are in. Then Amy, as always, will give us a COVID legal update. And then our leader of our DE&I services, Yana Williams, will give an update on that area. So lots of activity to get us back into the swing. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike.
Thanks, Kevin. Good to be back. Hopefully we can get through this PPP finally, but we'll see what else the government has in store for us. My goal this morning is to very quickly run through several points, actually 10 points, about which I hope you're aware. And I'm just trying to make you aware of those points so that you can make certain to bring them to the attention of whomever it is that is handling your forgiveness application and your forgiveness preparation. So again, as I often do, 3 miles wide, only about a foot deep. I'm making you aware of things, but I stress there are devils in these details. So be careful as you go forward. But at the same time, I think it's very valuable for you to be aware of the items that I'm going to talk about. Next slide, please. All right, so let's go through the forgiveness update. Some of the key things that have happened and we need to stress since the last time that we spoke to you on these issues. There are different forms that you can use for forgiveness, and it might be helpful for you if you can qualify to use what the government calls the Form EZ, which is a much shorter, much easier form. Here are the points that define whether or not you can use that much shorter form. As I say, self-employed, independent contractor, sole proprietor, no employees, you can use it, or if you did not reduce salary or wages more than 25% during the course of your covered period, unless you did so and you qualify for a safe harbor. So point is, make the inquiry in respect to whomever it is who is handling your forgiveness as to whether you qualify for the EZ form. Next point is the covered period. That's the period, as you know, during which you have the obligation and the opportunity to spend the PPP money that has been dispersed to you. You know the difficulties that we originally had with this in respect to there being a very short time frame within which to spend the money. It made no sense for a lot of companies who were shut down or limited. You can use the 8-week period. If you receive the loan before June 5, you otherwise can use the 24-week period, 168 days. Next point is the salary and wage reduction issue that we deal with here. If you have reduced salaries or wages in an amount in excess of 25%, you may lose some forgiveness unless you're involved in a safe harbor or an exception to that. That's something to look at if you have reduced salaries or wages more than 25%. Next slide, please. Reductions in FTEs has been a big source of issues, certainly coming across my desks from the various companies that I've helped try to get through this. Don't forget that if you reduce FTEs, there are some safe harbors for this that can still save your forgiveness. A key safe harbor is that if you can show that you were unable to operate due to a compliance order from the government, a shutdown order in effect, and if you restored the FTEs by the earlier of December 31 or the date of your forgiveness application. So if you've reduced FTEs because of COVID-19, you do have some safe harbors such that those reductions in FTEs will not necessarily diminish your forgiveness. The next point is to clarify that further in respect to which FTE reductions will not reduce forgiveness. A key one is if, this happens a lot, if employees have turned down an offer of rehire. That was going on a lot during the unemployment situation where the federal government was substantially increasing the unemployment payments to employees, and a lot of employees, low-paid employees, were refusing the offer to come back. Note that you have a reporting obligation to state unemployment if you did make an offer of rehire to an employee who was on unemployment and that employee turned it down. You're lawfully obliged to report that. Or if you have an employee who reduced your FTEs because they resigned or they were fired for cause or they requested a reduction in hours, that won't count against you either, so be mindful of that as well. Issue is, when should you apply for forgiveness? You have the right to apply at any time before the maturity of the loan, including before the end of the covered period, if you want. So for example, if you're in the longer covered period extends till 12/31, 2020, you can apply for forgiveness at any time that you wish. You don't have to wait until the end of the line. So if you need it off your books, yeah, fine. That might be a justification for applying for forgiveness at that time. But the common wisdom seems to be that things are changing. They're going to get more favorable, not less favorable. And you might want to wait for a better deal in terms of when you apply for forgiveness, because Treasury is promulgating new regulations all the time, and you just don't know the way things are going to play out. The deadline is within 10 months after the end of your covered period. You need to apply for forgiveness before the expiration of that 10 months, or you will lose the opportunity for forgiveness. Next slide, please. Some payroll forgiveness considerations. We've talked about this before, but it's worth stressing that the payroll that you spend, use the PPP money for those payroll expenditures. It's paid or incurred is the measuring stick during the covering period. So you don't just have to pay it during the covered period. It will still be covered for forgiveness purposes if it was incurred during the payroll during the covered period, but paid outside the covered period. Also, there's been a lot of confusion with respect to this. All forms of cash compensation apply in respect to the definition of payroll that will be considered for forgiveness up to, as I think you all know by now, $100,000 a year on an annualized basis. It's the gross amount that you pay. It includes commissions, bonuses, employer share benefits, severance, vacation, etc. So be careful to make sure that you get the maximum benefit for payroll. There have been a lot of recent and very complex developments in respect to payroll paid to owners. Get professional advice on this. There's no way that I can summarize this other than by bringing it to your attention. It differs in respect to whether you're a C corporation, an S corporation, whether you're a limited liability company, whether you're a limited partnership. It's fairly complex, but note that there are regulations and guidance out there that deal with payroll paid to owners. In respect to interest on debt, there was a lot of confusion as to what interest is included in your forgiveness figures. It was originally construed to be interest payable on mortgages construed as real estate mortgages, but that's been clarified so that it's interest that you pay on any secured debt. And that could be, for example, an equipment lease as well as a real estate mortgage. So look into that, because there's an awful lot of companies, for instance, who live off of equipment leases, which are security agreements, which have a lien attached to the equipment and would qualify as secured debt. Get some advice with respect to that. A lot of companies, that's a significant number. Also, there was a lot of confusion on what rental lease payments were covered within the forgiveness amounts that you can claim. Originally, there was a lot of commentary that it was only lease payments on your commercial office space or your commercial premises in which you did business, and only those lease payments were covered within the forgiveness parameters. That's been clarified so that it's rent and lease payments not only on real estate but also on equipment. And the eligibility applies if the lease agreement was enforced before February 15, 2020. It's not a lease that you can initiate thereafter and still apply for forgiveness based upon that. And last point I want to make, and that I want to stress, the devils are in the details, and those details are in the documents. Get some good counsel with respect to the kind of documents you're going to need. The audits are fairly intense. The process starts with your lender. Your lender is at risk to some extent if it blows the audit and approves something it shouldn't approve. So a lot of lenders in varying degrees are being very careful. The first thing you're going to look at is the right kind of documents, and you may need to make sure that you're assembling those along the way, and before you apply for forgiveness, you've got it in the appropriate package. That will speed up the process dramatically and dramatically increase the likelihood of a successful forgiveness application. Thank you. I'm done for now. That'll probably change before the next time I see you, but good luck to everyone and stay well.
Thanks, Mike. Let me see if we had a question here. It's saying that you have to include rent, other non-salary expenses if your salary is paid or the period exceeds your loan value. Now that's 26 weeks. And my guess is you always start with your payroll first, right?
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, your payroll has to be 60% of reduced from 75%. So I would definitely focus on the payroll first and fill in the rest thereafter.
But it can be 100% if you're continuing to pay people.
Yeah. You can get, if your payroll is exceeds or equals the amount of your loan amount, stop there.
Yep. That's it. Mike, thank you very much.
All
and
right.
We'll talk to you in 2 weeks.
Thank you all. Be well.
All right. With that, we're going to turn it over to Amy.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. Thank you, Mike. Okay, going to do a quick legal update for the things that have come up since the last time we spoke. First is some breaking news from yesterday. You may have seen this already, but a federal judge in Pennsylvania ruled Monday that Governor Wolf's orders to shut down businesses and limit gatherings to tackle COVID-19 were unconstitutional. Okay. Big news in a sense, but many of those orders have already expired. Many of the shutdowns have been opened back up. Many of the limitations on gatherings have been expanded. And this goes against this. Again, this is one federal judge in Pennsylvania. Most of the articles that you read on this note that he is a Trump appointee. So the expectation is that this individual has political leanings in one direction. Should be noted that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court had previously rejected this kind of a challenge, and federal courts in other places have rejected challenges like this. In general, have rejected challenges like this to similar governor's orders. So stay tuned. I think a couple of things are going to be significant. One is that the understanding is that the Wolf administration will challenge this and will appeal it. But the other is it really becomes more important if we need to go back into any kind of shutdown, or if Governor Wolf deems that we need to go back into any kind of shutdown. That's when this becomes sticky, because right now, like I said, most of the orders that are being quote unquote reversed have already expired. So stay tuned on that. Also an FFCRA update. So we are back to school. And if you joined us last month, we did a whole webinar session just on the back to school issues that are facing employers and facing your employees who are parents. And I've noted in past webinars that, again, we had a federal judge in New York, just one federal judge, struck down certain DOL interpretations of the FFCRA. And as you know, FFCRA was passed very quickly. The Department of Labor reacted very quickly and put out regulations, and some of that a New York judge took issue with, and the DOL updated its guidance in response to that. So a couple of things to take note. This seems like it should be obvious, but employers do not need to provide FFCRA when no work is available. So if the employee is already on furlough, right, you've already said no work is available to you right now, you don't need to grant FFCRA. As the DOL has noted, those employees should be eligible for unemployment benefits, not leave. But, and this, it sounds like there might be a circumvention going on by some employers. You don't elect to place someone on furlough because they request leave. Should be obvious again, and I think that, that most employers should know that. But keep in mind, it's not an option. If someone requests leave, you don't just put them on furlough, you get them to leave. And the reason that becomes important, and obviously, is under FFCRA, there is a payment involved. Part of it is paid. Another one of the questions that came up with this federal court judge in New York was that judge took issue with the idea that intermittent leave needs to be approved by the employer. So the DOL has updated this a little bit, but it has made one important distinction. DOL is still holding strong to their position that, yeah, intermittent leave needs to be approved by the employer, but if an employee has a child who is going to school in a hybrid model, so some days they're home, some days they're home distance learning, some days they're going physically to school, each time that child is going to school, right, that becomes a different request for leave, a new request for leave, and the employer has to grant that. So let's say you have a child who's home Monday, Tuesday, school is closed for cleaning on Wednesday, the child goes to school on Wednesday, Thursday. Those would be different leave periods, and it repeats the following week. So those are all new renewed leave periods. They don't have to be approved as intermittent leave. They're all individual requests for leave. And the DOL has clarified, if the school is physically open, but a parent decides, I'm not going to send my child, that's not FFCRA qualifying, okay? The school has to be physically closed. If there's distance learning going on, but the school is physically closed, FFCRA is in play. And that's even if there's a hybrid model. On the days that the school is physically closed to that child, FFCRA is in play. But if the employee makes the decision, school's open, but I'm going to distance learn, no go. Okay. And then just some FAQs, again, these that have come out in the last, probably since the last time we talked, or if not, things that are important to clarify. Keep in mind that it's 12 weeks of FMLA total in any 12-month period. However, you as the employer define your 12-month period. So if you have an employee who's already taken their 12 weeks, whether it was for another reason, a reason completely separate from FFCRA, or they have gotten through their FFCRA time, and I'm sure a lot of parents have at this point, they no longer qualify for FFCRA. Now you as the employer get to decide, am I going to be creative? Am I going to be accommodating? Am I going to try to work with people to keep them in my employ? What am I going to do at this point? Okay. And again, I said this before, the school is deemed closed if it is moved exclusively to online instruction. And then I've gotten this question a few times. You know, we had this employee, the child was distance learning in the spring and they figured it out. They still were working. Why should I give them FFCRA now? Employees don't waive their rights under FFCRA. So just because you had an employee who figured it out, who had another plan in the spring, if they come to you now and say, look, I need FFCRA, you can't deny it on that basis. And then another guidance that's come out from EEOC. So you already know the information on this slide. You can, as an employer, do screening. You can take temperatures. You can ask questions about symptoms. Just really important that the questions you're asking are about symptoms that we know from a reliable medical source that those are actually symptoms of COVID-19. So rely on the CDC, rely on the Departments of Health. But important, if you're going to ask everybody, okay? You really don't want to be singling out employees unless you can show that you have a reasonable belief based on objective evidence that that person might have the disease. And in my mind, it's just, let's ask everybody, don't single people out. Another interesting one is EEOC has said, don't ask employees about their family members' illness or exposure, okay? That's potentially a violation of GINA. Not a lot of people have never even heard of GINA. That's Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. So important, don't ask specifically about family members, but you can ask the broader question. You get to the same place by asking, have you had contact with anyone who's been diagnosed or who may have symptoms associated with the disease? You don't specifically have to ask about family members. And keep in mind, asking about family members may not get you to the place you want to go anyway, because what if someone lives with someone who's not a family member, right? And another really important issue, and this is another stay tuned kind of issue, we're getting this question a lot. Flu shots are out, apparently. It's a good time. I'm not going to give any medical advice, but experts are saying if you haven't gotten the flu shot in the past, this might be a good year to get it. And employers are asking, what should we require flu shots? And what about when we eventually do have a COVID vaccine? Should we be requiring that? You know, in the past, what we've seen is that healthcare settings, hospitals, doctors' offices have required their employees to get flu shots. But any employer can establish legitimate health and safety requirements that are job-related and consistent with business necessity. So it's something to think about. You may or may not want to be, though, this is the conversation I have with a lot of members, if you're going to be on the forefront of something like this, do you want to be the company that gets challenged, right? Do you want to be the company that ends up spending time, money, and energy fighting something like this in court? But keep in mind, if you are going to implement some sort of a requirement for flu vaccines or for a COVID vaccine, you still need to allow for reasonable accommodation and an interactive process, potentially on the basis of disability or religion. So something to keep in mind as well. And that I would not implement that kind of a requirement without having a really reasoned discussion with an employment attorney. And that's my update for now. Kevin, do we have any questions?
We do have one here. Amy, the question is, I have an employee is not yet eligible for FMLA, however, he's quarantined due to waiting results from a COVID test. Is he eligible for FFCRA even though he isn't eligible for FMLA?
Likely, yes. The requirements for FFCRA are different than they are for FMLA, so it's a much lower standard. So probably yes.
Okay, so there's not a length of time requirement like there would be.
I think it's 30 days. It's not the year and 1,250 hours that is required under FMLA.
Perfect. All right. Well, that's it. And I see we've been joined by Sienna now. So we're ready to hand the baton over to Sienna.
Hey, and Amy, I was seeing that question and I was typing the same answer. So yeah, so I was like, likely yes. I think it's 30 days that you have to have been working for the employer. And of course, you can email hotline for the person who asked that question. We can get you some specific guidance as well. But yeah, thanks everyone. So I'm here to provide a quick update on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And just to be clear, we sort of we add a topic into something like this, right? To updates when we have enough members asking about it, that it is beneficial to sort of answer those questions in a more group format like this, right? Where a lot of our members are present and listening to kind of have their questions addressed. So if at any point you're kind of running into questions along the lines of what I'm covering today, feel free to email those to me or hotline to consider so that we can consider including them in the next town hall, in the next webinar. And that's really what I'm trying to do today. Next slide, please, is to just cover some of these frequently asked questions that we're getting from members in this space. So a number of our members are starting at the very starting point, right? And sort of asking, where do we begin, right? And the answer is there's a range of starting points, right? And so you really kind of have to figure out where you are. But a number of our members have found that raising awareness is an excellent starting point. And they've had sort of a variety of ideas that they're trying out for doing that. And so we have members who are offering trainings on things like unconscious bias, but we also have members who are putting together sort of continued learning groups within their organizations, things like a book club. And we could certainly provide you with some suggestions in that regard, depending on sort of the topic that you're looking to raise awareness about in your organization. Some members are internally kind of trying to create and have town hall discussions or facilitated discussions involving both leaders and employees, or sometimes very just employee focused, not at the supervisory level, and even some kind of small group discussions. So these are all ideas that we've heard from members that they're either considering or actually trying out to just continue this process of raising awareness around the issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. And the idea kind of behind that, right, and behind their efforts, and some members have even phrased it this way, is to really get us all speaking the same language around these issues when it comes to the workplace. We kind of all want to have the same concepts in mind so that we can, quite frankly, collectively figure out ways to make this a part of our organization's efforts going forward. And there are some real business interests there. And for those of you who participated when I shared an update with Margaret Urich some weeks back on diversity and inclusion, we really mentioned that the workforce is changing, right? And sort of all that time and energy and effort that companies have put into recruiting talent and recruiting millennials, this is an area where this is going to become essential to that effort, to being able to sort of recruit and retain the top talent, and quite frankly, the top tier of talent that you probably will be wanting to have at your organization going forward. So again, that's why we're sort of trying to act as a conduit for sharing ideas among businesses and companies in this area. Okay, next slide, please. So also, we have members who are at, who are further down that road, right, of moving forward in this area. And some of them are ready to sort of go all in and commit time and resources to this beyond just sort of that raising awareness. And so we have members who are looking at setting DEI goals for their organization as a whole. We have some members who are saying we want to be viewed as sort of the leader of diversity and inclusion as an employer in our industry, in our geographic region. And so they're really looking at it from many angles, right? From branding towards potential recruits, branding towards customers, really sharing with them sort of their organization's earnest efforts in this regard to raise awareness, to unbias their own processes, and to make their own work environment more inclusive for all of their employees. And so a lot of them begin with a measurement step of sort of trying to figure out where are we as an organization when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And there are just a number of options, right? So there are certainly these sort of third-party assessments that you can use. We also have some members who have opted to go with an in-house survey that they sort of create and give some thought to. I would say if you're going to do that or you're thinking about doing that, they can range from very short to just short. I would say I wouldn't make it very long. I'd be very thoughtful and limited in your questions. And I would suggest reaching out to have someone eyeball it or review it before you send it out, a professional in that area, an employment attorney. If you're an MEA member, reach out to Hotline and they'll connect you with us to have a discussion about that. And then committees and focus groups. A lot of members who kind of are ready to put that time and energy in are having some of their executive leadership really champion and really participate in creating and leading committees or focused groups that are looking at where are we as an organization? What do we need to do to get to where we want to go when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion? And so right now that may sound a little vague to you with sort of me popping in now on these town hall webinars, that those things will start to become clearer as we continue sort of learning about this area together as professionals. Next slide, please. And more on the committee piece, because we do have a number of members who have formed these D&I committees. People want to know sometimes sort of like, well, how do we do that? Like, what's the one way to do that? And the answer is there's not one way, right? So again, an area where it's like, there's a range of possibilities, right? But I'll tell you, when it comes to creating a committee to look at where your organization is on diversity and inclusion or where it wants to go, that sort of buy-in from the executive leadership is essential, right, for it to be a successful effort. If you don't have that participation from your leadership, sort of someone from your leadership team at some of those highest levels, then what you have is really more of an awareness group, right, an awareness building group. And it's not gonna do too much in terms of business goals, right, which is really what we want the organization and efforts that employees are undertaking to do, right, to advance business goals. So there is sort of an art to aligning your business goals with your DEI efforts. And part of that, again, involves the higher levels of leadership being involved. And when we say being involved with something like a committee that's looking at these issues or that's moving these issues forward for an organization, they're actually sort of contributing to the discussion, right? They're sharing. They're doing sort of what some trainings that I know I've been part of. They're daring to be brave, right, and to be vulnerable with their employees, and it's actually a wonderful thing. You really see employees sort of a light bulb go off for them when they see leaders within their organization spending time and thought, right, mental energy on these issues. And certainly then it's always great buy-in and a great display of a commitment when a company is able to put resources towards this type of issue. The beautiful thing about this issue, right, is that it's so vitally important in general, right, and to society and people as a whole, but it also aligns directly with a lot of those business goals that leaders have, like creating engagement in their workforce, for example. And again, those are concepts that we're gonna be exploring as I sort of pop in to share updates in this area on future town halls. Next slide, please. Ooh. And I also wanted to mention that a lot of sort of a number of leaders are approaching this from a very much a change management perspective, right? And so that's something that we're going to start to explore as well. It's sort of, this also generally begins with raising awareness so that people, it's sort of, the idea here is you may have, hopefully, very smart individuals on your team, right? Who maybe aren't at those highest levels of leadership, but are nevertheless thinking and alert to these types of issues, right? You want them to be sort of informed and aware of why you're making changes, and that itself is part of that change management process, right? So we're going to start talking a bit about that, and maybe even a bit about sort of the neuroscience of change management, to really equip you as HR professionals and business leaders, to assist in that process, if and when it does arise within your organization, so that you're sort of already primed with understanding these concepts, so that when that need does arise, which it inevitably will, you're ready to go and advise and guide your employers in this regard. So I really look forward to sharing that info with you. Tune in for it. And then, Amy, if we have just like 2 or 3 minutes, we got an email question about perks for online employees. And so I was wondering if anyone who's listening, I mean, first, if there were any questions or comments, I'm happy to address those. I don't think there were any. I don't see any. But if we could pose that as a question for people to chat in, that would be fantastic. If there are any sort of perks that you've been providing to online workers, right? Workers who are working remotely, please go ahead and type into chat and share what your company's doing so that folks can read it and learn from that as well. Now I'll.
Sienna, one that I've heard, if people are doing like a virtual meeting, like, where they might have done a lunch meeting before, some people have arranged to have lunch delivered to their team for a meeting like that.
Oh, nice. Yeah, like that. And then you're sort of all doing the same activity at the same time, eating lunch, something that we normally would have done in person, right? That's awesome. And anyone, that sounds like a pretty cost-effective option. I know this particular question was also focused on that, of sort of like a cost-effective, low-cost, or even no-cost ideas. Please type in and share so that we can share with everyone.
While people are typing in, let me just make one comment about the work you've been doing, Sienna. When this all kind of came in the spring, we talked a lot internally about DEI, and we kind of said we're not sure people are going to want to do something or do change management. And I think we are definitely seeing more of the trend towards let's commit to making change in our organization. Sienna has been working with a lot of management teams and brings a blend of, I'd say that legal expertise, so that when the conversations are occurring, you're on a path that's a smart path, but also, the passion and understanding and awareness of what this means. And I think there's a lot of value being created, so if you are thinking or you want to talk with your team or others about, what should you do? Because this is not an easy thing, for sure. Sienna is somebody that is helping members with those strategic conversations and is available to level of interest right now. And we see this as something that's going to keep growing and growing. And frankly, it's not going away. I think any business, you have to take a real hard look in this area right now. So we're excited to be helping so many members in this. Thanks to Sienna.
Sure thing. Okay.
Well, I don't see anything typed in, so we can maybe make that a discussion for a future topic as well. So I think we're ready to close it up. No more questions? You have your closing slide, Amy. So again, just to remind everyone, for MEA members, within member tools, there are sample policies, communications, there's DEI policies, as well as information for members. We also have our coronavirus/recovery center. Members, if you haven't done one yet, we do have a prototype safety and health policy that you can tailor to your situation. Maybe if you haven't come back before, but you're coming back now, you definitely want to take a look at that. And as always, members can reach out directly to the hotline for both HR as well as our legal support. And once again, we thank you for joining us today. Look to see you much more in the future as we begin a very busy fall. Have a great day, everyone.